Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon session. This is a joint session between University of Bergen and the Institute for Marine Research. So we are doing a shoulder-to-shoulder presentation, but sequential. So that's why I would like to start first by summing up part of what we were discussing in our session this morning. That was about ecosystem management, because we think that management is of such a crucial importance if we are going to develop industry or resource hunting in either the oceans or in the coastal zone. And as I said on Thursday morning, I said that the sea is changing. And it's more obvious up in the polar waters. An Institute of Marine Research, we have a collaboration not only with the University of Bergen, but actually other universities in Norway in running research vessels. And we go and patrol the oceans for actually look after the changes. And if you go to the next slide, you will see that this is actually a quite important, and it's a tedious system where we use our research vessels and look for physical changes in the salinity, temperature, etc., etc. And we do a survey of what's in the ecosystem. Next. And as we see, here in this presentation, we see that in 2004 we had Atlantic fishes in a quite large area. You see Spitsbergen up here, this is Norway. And we had Arctic fishes, the blue area there. This is actually a picture of the ecosystems. But if you see now, in last years, you see the red area from the Atlantic fishes has expanded enormously. And look at this tiny little area with the Arctic fishes and the ecosystem of the Arctic. It's pressed north. Next. And this has quite a dramatic influence on also the economy and also the management between the nations, because the ocean belongs to many of us. And here you see the mackerel stock. And as you can see again, dramatic changes in where the mackerel is going in the waters. You see here, now it's really crowded around Iceland, and Greenland has also got good mackerel stocks floating around for being harvested. And then comes politics. Next slide. And for us, this means technology, and this means also new industry and new innovations, because we have to patrol and observe the ocean in many different ways. So we develop a complete new sets of how to observe the oceans. So we have made an ocean observatory, and here we think that as we are patrolling, as we're watching the sea, we give also new opportunity to industry, because we see new challenges. If we are going to see these large changes, we have to be sure that it's monitored in a safe and scientific sound ways, because this is big numbers in the economy for what is then let open for fisheries or other industries to harvest. And here I will mention that, for instance, macroalgae, they are also part of what we are harvesting. Next. And again, if you see what's going on in the ocean, there is sea traffic, we have oil and gas. We have to share the ocean with many interest or stakeholders. And that is also why you need to do a proper and sound scientific survey of the resources in the ocean, because they are of such high value, not only for us, but for the coming generation. Next slide, please. And here you see my heart belong to the ocean, and this heart is actually made out of krill, and it's not fake. You know, here you see many stocks, and it's again technology. How do we harvest the ocean in new ways? You see krill is the heart, but you can also see these bands over there. They are different layer of different type of mesopelagic fishes. So here, when my colleague is going to talk about mesopelagic later, remember the heart and this picture, because here again come new technology, new innovation that we need to put in place. Next. And last of my part here, I have to remind you about something in staggering numbers. So large part of the fisheries are done by fishermen in the little green boat and not in huge vessels like our research vessel here. Here you see the symbol of large, new, exciting technology, but actually nearly 80% of what is caught in the ocean is done by little fishing boats. And here again, ladies and gentlemen, we do need to do fishing in a different way. And again, new industry, new way of fishing, that's new innovation.
Next, please. So one of the challenges of the world is that we need to get more food out of the ocean. And there is a kind of a pyramid here for showing the trophic levels. And in the land-based ecosystems, we do a lot of harvesting on the first trophic level and on the second trophic level. And that's almost anything we do in the land is on the first and the second trophic level. In the ocean, the organisms at the first trophic level are microscopic. And therefore, we don't harvest them. And the organisms at the second trophic levels are also generally very small, and except for something like the scallops and the blue mussels and things like that, we don't harvest them either. So in the ocean, we start most of our harvesting at the third trophic levels, which at the land compares to the wolves and the bears. And then in the ocean, we feed extensively on the wolf eaters and the wolf eaters. And this pyramid in gray in the middle is kind of unfair to the size differences in the trophic ladder, because the size is even much more skewed to the bottom. So if we want to take out more food from the ocean, we cannot take out more food from the top levels. We have to learn how to take out food from lower trophic levels, or how to grow food at the lower trophic levels. Next, please. So one of them is to work on the trophic level number 1, which is the algae, to learn how to grow algae. This is done many places in the world. And one of the work we have in Bergen is then, can we make salmon feed out of algae we have been growing? Basically making salmon a trophic level 2 organism rather than a trophic level 4 or 5 organism. Next, please. The other approach is to grow the filter feeders. And there is also an enormous amount of opportunity to grow different kinds of filter feeders than those we are usually thinking of. And we should also grow a lot more of those we actually are thinking of. And the third approach is, next, to fish deep down in the food chain. What is called balanced harvesting, not to fish down the food chain, starting from the top and taking away everything, but actually to have a balanced approach to how we fish and take more of the resources we need from the lower trophic levels. And this is where the mesopelagic fish come in. Next, please. So a little bit more in detail about these things as we are now working. We have a pilot, which we call the National Algae Pilot, just north of Bergen, where we are working on how to grow salmon food out of the waste stream from oil refinery. And this is there's a lot. It's almost the whole national team of research in Norway is included in this, and also a lot of companies are included in this. And we are still in a very early stage, but maybe in the end there may be food for salmon, and there may be other products which are useful for humanity. Next, please. Then alternative is to work with the macroalgae. Would you like to say something about the macroalgae?
I simply so fascinating by the macroalgae, and they can be used for so many different purposes. People tend to put them into creams and also for sushi. But we have also heard that you can isolate stuff from it, because these kind of polysaccharides, they are actually inert to our immune system. So now they have been implanted into, for instance, the heart muscles. So there is an ocean of opportunities.
Next, please. And then we have in Bergen a very interesting program going on growing tunicates. And so next, please. So there's a possibility to make a new biomass either for feed or for the cellulose component of this. So these are animals making cellulose. Cellulose is what you think about timber. And this cellulose does not have to stand up like timber. So it's a very nice and pure type of cellulose, which can be used to so many other things. Next, please. There is also a potential growth opportunity here. That initial experiments shows that there is a protein production capacity which is 100 times higher than measured for any domesticated land-living animal, which is also a problem, because if all this biomass is spawning at the same time, the whole of Norway will be filled in these kinds of animals, and except for the growers themselves, they would like this to happen, but the boat owners would be kind of furious. So we have some problems to solve still. Next, please. So there is take also the next. So next, please. There is a range of applications where this animal can be used. Can you get the next? There you are. So there's a fine industry, and there is an industry which can go into feed, and there's lots of opportunity which are about to be explored at the moment. So lots of chances for ingenious biotechnologists here. Next, please. And there are many other kinds of filter feeding animals. So there are many different things we could do to explore more of the animals, and also other kind of fish which we don't utilize so much in aquaculture. So we could have an aquaculture which was less dependent on salmon. Not less salmon, but less dependent on salmon, because these other things can come in addition. Next, please. And then we have the third trophic level, which is the mesopelagic fish. These eat the herbivores, which eat the phytoplankton in the sea. And sometimes the catch look like this. There's only one thing in the catch. It's actually one age group of one species. And other times the catch looks like this, which is a mixture of the whole ecosystem. And then you can say that this was not so good, because how can we then dare to do some catches? But let's first see some small figures here. Next, please. There are probably, and this is a kind of a probably with the capital everything, 10 billion tons of mesopelagic fish globally. Let's say it's not 10, let's say it's 5, let's say it's 20, let's say it's 30. We don't know exactly, but the thing is, it's so much more than everything else. It's likely to be 100 times larger than the global fish catch annually. And these are short-lived organisms. And in addition to the mesopelagic fish, there are even more other kinds of mesopelagic organisms, like squid. So there's a lot to take out of it. And if we compare to the annual catches of fisheries, 0.1 billion tons, or the agricultural animal production, which is 3 times as large, the potential which is in the midwaters is enormous. And it has the potential to reduce the pressure on the terrestrial ecosystems if we can learn how to harvest this in a balanced ecological way. Next, please. And then we go back to the heart. So this is because these things are obviously good for you. It's heart medicine. There's a krill in the middle. But so this is a krill in the middle, and the top layer, the first blue layer, these are these fish which are the pure layer of this single species of mesopelagic fish. And this layer down here is this mixed layer where we have some krill, some shrimp, a couple of species of mesopelagic fish. This is outside Norway, If you go other places, you will find also some thin layers which are one species, one age group layers, and you will find mixed layers which are much, much more mixed than our layers are. But we are going to go even deeper. Next, please. We are also going to investigate the deep seas to search for new knowledge and new resources. And I am sorry that you couldn't see that this was originally a video, but it was lost in the transfer through my computer. So this is from the depths of the Norwegian Sea, and this is a black smoker, which all the time sends out very hot water full of minerals and nutrients from the depths of the earth into an ecosystem which is not fed by sunlight, but fed by the energy from below. Probably this is the way life started on Earth. Not exactly this place, but some place like this. This is where it started. And this is an enormous biological diversity down there, which is very different from the diversity with us. And next, please. And we are able to go in with our technology to take out samples. And this should also be a video, the way you could say that this hose is taking out a small sample and stored in this cylinder here. And these samples can then be used for finding these new enzymes. And these organisms they are so different from ours, and they live in these different environments, but they are probably also very useful in some of the environments we create in our laboratories, where we would like to have microbial processes going on at higher temperatures than they normally occur with us. Well, there is the ecosystem which does this regularly. So there is a huge potential to take organisms from there and use them in our own systems. But this is also a system which we don't know how big is the opportunities down there and how fragile is the system. So this is also a system where we have to go in, just as Sissel has shown with the overall scheme for management of the top-level fishes of the pelagic zone. We also have to go in with management for the basic resources, so that we are sure that when we harvest from these, we do it in a sustainable way, so that also our grandchildren can be proud that we did it and the way we did it.
Was that the last slide?
That was the last slide. Yeah.
That was what we discussed, and now what we would like to do is to discuss with you, because I think that's the best way to run a seminar. Yeah. So are there questions or comments? We would be highly interested in that. Yep.
When it comes to pelagic fish, they have short-lived organisms swimming together with long-lived organisms. Ones that take 5 years or even longer to fully mature. How do you separate those when you start a fishery?
Yeah, so the question is that in the mesopelagic zone, there may be places where, or it may even be very common, that there is a mix of species which have different lifespans. Some have very short lifespans, some may have long lifespans. And it's easier to have a fishery, you can have a high fishery pressure on those who have short lifespans than on those who have long lifespans. And we would not make damage to the long-lived organisms because they are caught in a bycatch of short-lived organisms. That was the question. And the answer is not easy. So the answer is that this is something we have to work on, and we have to find out, are there some parts of the ecosystem where it's easier to harvest the short-lived organisms. And it's more likely that the short-lived organisms are higher up in the water column than the long-lived organisms. And the younger of individuals of the smaller organisms are usually even higher up than the adults of these organisms. So we will have to go in and take a case by case, ecosystem by ecosystem, and investigate what is the possibility to do something with the least harm. But we have to compare the harm we do in this ecosystem with the harm we do on the terrestrial side by not doing anything. So this is a tricky balancing.
I would like to comment on that too, because I think that this is part of why it's so important to work with industry. So actually clever fishing is one element here. We are also doing the same with the stocks, that we actually look and watch what's actually passing through the trawls, so that we can see whether it's something to be lifted up or whether simply not to go into that area. And then also we have sonars and echo sounders that has to be developed much more clever so that we do not run into these problems.
Question is how we prepare to monitor the fisheries.
Yeah. Actually, there is a control agency for usually how you harvest in the waters. And yes, observers, and also we have to report on what kind of catches we are having. And that is part of the problem with the politics, is that it had to be very carefully monitored and reported. So this is part of the negotiation. So one of the fourth issue here is actually to have a good regulating system. As you point out, that's critical. And I think also that that is why we would like to present it here, because it needs not only technology, but it needs regulation. And I think, it needs tough regulation because this is international waters as well. But we have system also for how we tackle the problems like that. Not always successful, you're absolutely right, but this is something we have to start when we start up this kind of fisheries. We are pursuing it along 4 lines. That is, where are they, so that we can pinpoint those where the layers are cleaner and clearer. And the second is how to put up fishing gear so that we are fishing on the right of the more clean stocks or wanted stocks. The fourth is the technology for lifting up out of the water into the boats, because these are fishes that disintegrate very quickly. So we have to do some sort of processing probably on ship. So this is again new technology, but the fourth but not the least is actually to put in place regulation. And that is so critical. So you have a very good point.
But the other thing is that this is a global opportunity, and one can start with a very small regional experimental fishery to try to find out what would be the technological possibilities and disadvantages, and they will not have global bad consequences if you do something on a regulated scale somewhere. So,
yes. Yeah.
So I would just repeat what you said.
That's typical for all kind of fisheries, that the big sharks in fisheries, if they are not controlled, we have the same problem for every kind of stock in the oceans if we do not control them properly. But I think actually what is nice about mesopelagic fishes is that it's more fairly distributed actually around the world. It's actually up it's up to also nations along the African coast, in Asia. It's something we can share and harvest, but we have to do it together.
But are you in the process of negotiating some sort of trial fishery together with others?
Just let me repeat your question for the video, so everyone can hear you what you say. So you ask if we are in the process of negotiating a trial fishery. Yeah. An international agreement for a trial fishery. No, I don't think we are doing that now. But we are raising the awareness that this is something that the world needs to put attention to. So we are at this very preliminary stage right now.
Because the fisheries have started somewhere, so there are fishing trials for these mesopelagic fishes. So there are ship owners who are doing it. So it's about to start to put some more pressure on your question.
It's nice to follow up on this workshop in the morning and now the same issue. Why we don't give a chance before we introduce this kind of regulation, which might take years, decades even, for the private, the commercial people, the sharks, to do, let us see if it's going to work commercial, economically. This may not be. And utilization. Allow more to the technology to develop. Then the effects of whatever being made, no matter if, even if they catch 100 million tons, which is equal to the whole capture fishery in the world now, and then study the consequences. Then we start to talk about the limits, how we can control. I don't know, this is an approach, but we need, before, this is an opportunity for the globe, for everyone in this world. It is going to address so many problems. So giving a chance for someone to do something and then to see how things will develop from that point on.
So let me just first repeat your question so that it goes into the video. So you say that why don't we give industry a chance to make a first attempt to find out how to do this? Not to have to wait 10 years until we have found all the regulations. And then if the industry is behaving well, we can scale up gradually and regulations can come gradually. That is kind of the short version of your question, I think. Yeah. Well, I think it's no way we can stop the private sector from doing this. There is no global ban on doing these things, and so I think that we are in situations now that probably this can start on small scale many places. So it's actually not the question of banning these things, but to come up with management understanding and ecosystem understanding at the same time as the industry starts to do these things. So it's not that one thing should be before the other, but that we should work at the same time with technology, with management, and with the ecosystem.
And that is why I always keep saying that there is nothing for a state with a coastline that can do that is so good for the national economy as put up ocean and coastal management plans, because this is actually the best way to have the possibility to use the natural resources in an economical, sustainable ways, because here it is so much investments you have to do to enable this in a safe way. And that again means that if you do the nature management system at the coast zone and at the oceans, that will be a very good issue for whatever you are doing here and for whatever you are hunting for. Either it's fish, mesopelagic, sea urchins, or macroalgae. It's wonderful for whatever you take out of the sea. It's an investment.
And by that we have to stop. Our time is up. We thank you very much for being here and for participating. And we are happy to continue the discussions with the emails and whatever for all the foreseeable future.
And look after the ocean. It deserves it, because that's where our future is.